Welcome to another episode of the HealthCast. I'm super excited to have Chris Coulter on today. Chris is the CEO and founder of MentorWell, a child parent mentorship program. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Phil. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you tell us just from the get-go what MentorWell is all about?
It's important to understand the original vision and then kind of what it has evolved to.
Sure.
So the MentorWell originally is a tribute to my 14-year-old daughter, Maddie, who 11 years ago this April died by suicide. And I was incapacitated for better part of a decade. The only thing I was really able to do was I wrote a lot. And when I wrote, I posted on different social media outlets and I would get a ton of responses from parents, mostly in the form of direct messages and just saying, thank you for sharing all this stuff. We're going through something very similar with our teenager right now. And so fast forward to 10 years after Maddie's passing, I'd had conversations with over 2,000 parents. And there were three questions that always came forward. One was, is my child struggling or is this normal kind of teenage adolescent behavior? Two is, how can I communicate with my teen without shutting them down? And three is, where can I go for effective mental health resources? So the MentorWell initially was supposed to be, it was an online mentorship program for kids who were, I won't call it in crisis. They weren't in crisis, but they were maybe lacking confidence or direction or resiliency. And another important aspect that was really important was talking about the elements of emotional intelligence because schools don't focus on that at all. Originally, what I wanted to do is I wanted to capture lived experience of kids who were, or adults who maybe 5, 10, 15 years older who have gone through similar types of experiences in their life. So take my daughter Maddie as an example. She navigated a really ugly divorce and she was put into a very undesirable place where she had to make a decision. She had to be put in a position to make a decision about whether family stays in Canada or whether they go to Europe with their mom. And other aspects. So she was really struggling with that. A lot of kids struggle with parents' divorces, and we
Yeah.
tend to minimize it or go, "Oh, our kids are resilient." The other thing, she was a competitive swimmer, and she swam. She swam at the provincial level, which was a pretty high level, which entailed being in the pool 6 times a week. 2 of those days were twice a day, and kids burn out. We burn out, our kids burn out too. So we were at a meet and she was not her normal successful self in the pool. And as a consequence, at the end of the first day, it was a 2-day meet. She said, "Dad, do I have to go back?" And I could just tell she was fighting the water. Not that she didn't have the physical capability. She was just, you could tell she was emotionally not into it. So I said, sure. I gave her a pass. And that was, unfortunately, that was the last time she swam competitively. So if we had taken those two events, a nasty divorce and someone who's maybe experiencing burnout from sports or athletics, if you could partner them up with someone who'd been through it 5, 10 years earlier, had come through the other side, there's a relatability aspect. There's coping strategies. How did you navigate this? If she would have been given those tools or been able to share those thoughts, I think we may have had a different outcome. The challenge I find with kids and parents is we dismiss them. We dismiss their problems as just teenager stuff. So if we give them a non-judgmental space to talk and share and build trust, parents are not mentors. Parents will think they're kids' best friends some cases, or they're their kids' mentors. If you think kids are telling you everything you want to know, they're telling you exactly what you want to know and not anything more. So having that safe space. And so I coached kids. I coached hockey for years, coached soccer, and I had done mentorship sessions with kids. And I think the telltale sign is when a mentee comes up to you afterwards and says, "Chris, I don't know who I would have talked about some of this really tough stuff had I not been able to talk to you." And Because when we don't have an outlet to be able to talk about that stuff, we bury it. And for kids in particular, especially if they don't have the emotional know-how on how to process it, that comes out in a lot of negative behaviors.
Yeah.
So that was the mentorship thing. One thing I didn't anticipate, creating an online mentorship program, I just thought, okay, yeah, kids don't necessarily like therapy. So I had
Yeah.
a whole bunch of parents reach out to me whose kids refuse to go to therapy, but
Yeah.
clearly should have been in therapy. And I said, we're not an alternative. So we can be a complement. So I had all these inappropriate candidates for mentorship approach me and I had to turn them down. It was more concerning. It was
More.
more crisis based, more acute.
Yes, sir.
And so what I realized, parents need to be more informed. They need education. So I started up something called the Lifeline Parent Workshops, where I go into corporations and I conduct three 1 hour sessions. I go to companies because one interesting thing is 1 in 4 working parents is dealing with a child who is emotionally struggling. And when your child struggles as a parent, you struggle as well. You can't help. You can't just kind of walk out the front door, go into the office, and it's kind of like carte blanche as soon as you walk in there. Going back to those 3 questions I mentioned earlier, that's the foundation for our
For
three
mentor well.
1 hour sessions.
Yeah.
And it's about a half hour each one, but the most impactful stuff are the ones that are the Q&A portion. So parents, we open up the lines, and if they are not comfortable talking about it, because a lot of parents live with this deep seated shame and they
Yeah.
feel judged
Powerful word.
want
Yes.
and they don't want to share, I allow them to email it to me. So we try to create this world of anonymity,
Yeah.
if they choose.
I just want to ask this obvious question. I think it's obvious for you, but I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Were you in the mentorship environment prior to your loss, or this was a transitional point in your life, and then through your challenges and challenge of losing Maddie, that this part of your own healing is now assisting others and developing mentor and this program that you're describing. But you weren't in that field prior, right?
No, the
This evolved.
only kind of parallel would have
Yeah.
been the coaching kids, not mentorship per se. No, this evolved from after Maddie passed away. I said one thing. I made one promise. I said I never want another family to endure what the heartache and loss that our family went through. And so
Yeah.
your brain changes when you go through traumatic loss. And there's some days that I have like 1,000 things coming through my head and other things where I could barely get out of bed. So,
Yes, sir.
but as far as the workshops became something that we educate parents. And I've got this quick little assessment tool. I'll call it an awareness tool because it's not an official diagnostic tool. It's
Yeah.
called Teen Signal Check. It's 12 questions, 2 minutes. Parents can go through especially if they're seeking or they're seeing a different side of their child that they haven't seen before, and your gut is telling you something is off, then they can go through this and it gives them kind of a three graded score: green, yellow, or red. Green
Hmm.
means good, yellow mean cautionary, and it gives you some steps. What I wanted to do was I wanted parents to stop being so casual in dismissing stuff that clearly there's something going on.
You said in one of your posts something that really resonated with me, and I have my own term for it. It's the idea that parents don't think this could happen to them. And in my field, in my medical career, and previously having some jobs in the outdoors with a lot of big egos and stuff like that, in the mountain, and ski patrol and other things, and raft guiding, whatnot, I've encountered this, and I think it's a human thing. This I call it "not me" syndrome. They might do that. We might have a safety talk, but that only applies to say that. And I think that was something. That's what I heard when some of your posts, that "not me" syndrome. That won't happen to me, but and I think you're shining a light on a place that needs that, in an area of communication and parenting that's needed. And it sounds also like you're providing an avenue for regarding that communication, to improve communication,
Yeah.
parent to child.
And it's a win-win from a company's perspective because 1 in 4 of your working parents, which translates into 1 in 7 of your employees, is dealing with a child who is struggling. The impact it has on absenteeism, presenteeism, productivity, the cost of your benefit plan and retention is significant. And so the other aspect to help companies rationalize why this is so important for their employees, there is a huge financial reward for companies who actually get ahead of the curve and start putting some preventative tools in place. And it's crazy the hundreds of thousands of dollars of net benefits that will happen as a consequence. So
Yeah. I love that.
that was the education piece. And then the other piece to this that so it's evolved from mentorship to the education piece. And the other aspect would, and I remember this wholeheartedly, there is a huge shame factor from a parenting perspective. And you feel like you have no one to talk to. And it is a very isolating and desolate experience for someone. And your friends would, oh yeah, don't worry, it's just teenagers, or someone at
Mhm.
work is being very judgmental, and so they can't share it with anyone. They may share it with their boss if they have a good relationship with, to say, I'm dealing with something right now. I saw an opportunity to create a parent support group. So on the school platform, I created this parent support community called When Something Feels Off. And it's one of those situations where parents are navigating these struggles, and it's a heavy and scary feeling. And you can't talk about to anyone about it. So by putting parents in a room, sharing strategies, sharing wins, and it's not just doom and gloom. We try to keep a lightheartedness to it because you need to laugh sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I get
Because
that.
if you don't, you'll cry.
Yes.
So
I get it.
so anyway, just before Christmas, I started up When Something Feels Off, and now what I've done is I've created a paid tier for employees to be able to have access to coaching, to workshops, to mentorship sessions, to an expedited referral service. Because I don't know what it's like in the U.S., but up in Canada, within our public system, to be able to get a diagnosis and to be able to get in front of the right practitioner, mental health practitioner, it's upwards sometimes of 6 months or more.
That sounds pretty accurate, pretty similar to the US. It's a lot. I live in a rural area, and we're definitely undersourced, and, it's a big need.
And this problem's not going away.
Yes, sir.
And if we relied upon the government and our schools to fix the problem, it ain't going to happen. So we need some people who, and quite frankly, the lived experience aspect of this is probably more beneficial than the clinician side, because we can relate to the world that parents are currently going through.
Yeah, yeah. That's powerful stuff, powerful work. I feel like all of us in the US have strong opinions about healthcare and our healthcare system, not always positive, but one thing I am proud, I've been in medicine about 20 years and in various roles, and I do think that we're normalizing mental health was what I was trying to say. Now, it used to feel when I first started, it used to feel like either taboo or like, oh, that person in room 7. And now, especially for me personally, I try to be an advocate for my patients' mental health. I understand what you're saying when people don't want to go to a counselor. I'm not a counselor, but I at least reschedule them just for some accountability and keep showing. I just tell them just keep showing up, and whatever you need, just keep, and we'll keep. And maybe then from there, maybe I keep working on where that counselor fits in. But just being available and normalizing the conversation that it's a depression and anxiety can be parts of life, and then from there, providing resources where I can for those patients and resources. And sounds like that's what you're doing. We're filling that void and shining a light where there hasn't been.
Well, and I think that's the challenge. People who've read my stuff, they will reach out to me and go, I don't know where to go. This has just happened to me. What do I do? And now, as opposed to being asked and sort of having a couple of resources, now when because of these workshops, if something does happen, parents walk away with clarity. They walk away with a plan and peace of mind. So they now are confident when faced with something like this, they have the tools to be able to deal with it, as opposed to kind of cross your fingers and hope it never happens. This gives them structure. And then when they have peace of mind, those productivity levels that have been eroded at work all of a sudden start to come back to normal. And that's
Yeah.
why this is so invaluable. to go upstream and find out what's causing those kids that are falling in the water so we can actually get ahead of the problem and not just dealing with the consequences of it.
So we've talked about the service you provide and the start of your company. As a business, how are things going? We've clarified the need. There's a need for this for the work that you're doing. Are you incredibly busy? How are things going on your end?
It's you know what? I've been building. I've got some clients who have retained my services,
Yeah.
and it's it's great, and quite frankly, I had to be careful how many I took on
Yeah.
out of the gate, and not only that, but I've re-engineered this thing a couple of times. When you take a couple of steps forward, and then you gotta step back and go, "Okay, you know what? I haven't thought about that." So
Mm.
now I'm at a point in time where I'm actually, okay, now this model that once started just from a mentorship perspective, I've got all these other synergized elements to it is actually a really comprehensive business. If I had had access to something like this when Maddie was going through her struggles, I think our outcome would have been much different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard to swallow. Uh, I hear what you're saying. Sounds like you have as a business, it has some structure and you are working primarily with families, I'm hearing, and also with corporations to improve employee well-being and ultimately production. Is that
Well, it's awareness. Want parents to just be aware that these subtle signs that they think something's going on, to just take heed to it,
Mhm.
because there's meaning behind the behavior. And silence is not a strategy, and silence is not safety.
Well said. One of the things that we touch upon in this podcast is also the intersection with technology to improve outcomes. How does technology, AI, as much as we're talking about a human element and connection and communication, what kind of tools are you using that are helping your business? And then second, maybe you can speak to this. I heard a quote along the lines of that our diet isn't just what you put in your mouth, but it's everything we expose ourselves to. The music, the commercials, the movies, the video games. If all of that is affecting our brain, like you had said earlier, affects our brain. Can you speak to those two thoughts?
Technology, if I did not have access to, I'll call it I don't know where I'd be right now. A lot of these it just allows me to, my output is probably 5 to 10 times greater than it otherwise would have been,
Yes. Yeah.
just because, like I talk about that, like teen signal check, be able to write code, because now you don't have to be a programmer or a coder to be able to do this. The same with that ROI tool, to be able to embed that onto my website. It probably would have cost me a ton of money. Now, you still have to do your due diligence and make sure that the numbers check and things along that line. So AI is a huge element for me to be able to
Yeah.
scale my business.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I was reached out to by posts that I did this week. Someone out of Detroit, and she said, "Chris, your story really resonated with me. I am an engineer by background. I'm getting very passionate about automations." And she said, "I lost my mother almost 20 years ago to suicide, and I felt compelled to reach out to you because I want to help you in some way." So we are looking at kind of my business structure and looking about how we can automate it,
Yeah.
because ultimately, yes, we are a for-profit business, but I also, a big a part of this, and this is more Maddie's doing than anything. Maddie, who is kind and compassionate, and always kind of cheering on the underdog. I never wanted this to be something for the affluent only. And the reality is, not everyone would be able to afford this. So I want to create a charitable to the MentorWell, so
It's
we
great.
can actually have kids go through this that
Yeah.
otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it.
Love that. I love it. That's awesome, Chris. How about This might be just our opinions, but are you seeing maybe any trends in relation to all of us are a lot of people glued to our phones, movies, exposure, and that comment I made about our diet isn't just what you put in your mouth; it's everything we expose ourselves to. In relation to like, is mental health really? I think in the U.S., depression is and lonely. There's a loneliness epidemic I'm hearing. I don't know if that's global, but are these things? Is mental health decreasing as we're getting busier? Maybe. And what are your thoughts there?
Well, as I've heard the expression, we are more connected than ever, and yet we are
Yeah,
more disconnected than
yeah,
ever as a society.
yeah, yeah.
And
For that
I
too.
I truly believe that there's a reason why I'm having conversations with parents whose kids are 8 and 9 years old who are having suicidal ideation and depression and anxiety. That I that is something that's manifested since the advent of technology. I think that's exposure to the we're handing kids phones like it's a toy without rules, without instruction,
Yeah,
and we expect them to kind of figure out what to do with it or what not to do with it. So
yeah.
I think we have to stop being so casual about handing technology off to kids without
Like, you wouldn't do that with the car keys, right? Yeah.
no,
Right.
exactly. It's is something that they need to have the emotional maturity to be able to handle it. And I do see some emergence of companies or of consulting that are creating the need, the awareness and the need for parents to be more vigilant about not being so casual about handing over a phone
You're seeing
without
this shift and this shift in maybe values or just the question that you need to be more engaged with this. It's not a solution for babysitting.
well, what's the biggest complaint that parents have? "Oh, I can't get my kid off my phone," or get my kid off their phone, or they're on their phone too many hours. Well, the interesting thing is we're not necessarily the conversation's the correct one. It's not necessarily how long they've been on the phone, it's when they're on their phone. So that witching hour happens after 10 o'clock. So
Yeah,
how
interesting.
how
Interesting.
something hits a teenage mind, or hey, we can use ourselves within that mix as well. If we look at something that we pick up an email from work at 10 o'clock or before we go to bed, and it's disturbing and it's upsetting, how does that impact us?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, those rules about when the use of phone, they need to be issued before the phone is handed over. And it's almost,
Right.
I'm seeing lots of people issue contracts. It's harder to make rules around something after you've handed it to them and say, okay, by the way, here's the caveat. You know how you've been in your room? You can't do that anymore.
Like, once it's in motion.
Well, the other aspect is too, it's really important to include your kids in the conversation. Make them part of the decision-making process because we tend to default to how we may have been brought up. Rules were just appointed. Rules were meant to be followed, but we were never part of the decision tree.
This is true.
By
True in my household.
by having kids and being part of the equation, they are more accepting knowing that they were part of that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working with a couple young ladies who have an app that is kind of this relates to some of the things we just said and you just said. The app is to organize help during a health crisis. Let's say a cancer patient, and it might be anything from getting groceries to help the patient organize their network, and anything from getting groceries to, hey, can you give me a ride to my doctor's appointment, to maybe laundry, maybe just conversation if I'm lonely, and it's wonderful, it's great. I think in generations past, were more connected to their neighbors, to their family, there was a little more, I think the word, maybe some intimacy and just, or concern, or I mean, I live on a street. Some of these properties here have some acreage, but I don't know everybody on my street, and I've been here 5 years. And I don't.
Yeah.
Well, growing up, I did. When I imagine my folks did in an apartment building in Buffalo, New York. I imagine they knew most of their neighbors, and there was family in the community. And I don't think we all have retained that sense. So I think this app is great. I think it's filling a need that a human need that may have been addressed differently previously is my thought.
No, I totally agree with you as far as I think the dynamic and you know what? A neighbor could have been an informal mentor for a kid. I remember I had a paper route when I was growing up, and I knew
Yeah.
all the neighbors. I had to go
Right, a paper route.
I had to collect money from them. And that 80 cents that I needed to collect from them, that was like, and I knew my neighbors. I knew
Yes.
a considerable part of my neighborhood. And we just don't have that same dynamic that exists today.
Hopefully, though, I agree with you, and hopefully products like yours are, I think, hopefully we're all adapting and evolving and trying to, I think that I don't think that human need is still there to connect with others, to have acceptance, whether in the family unit or and beyond. So
We need human connection. It's one of our human needs.
yeah.
It's absolutely critical.
How does the future look for MentorWell as a business? Is it how are things looking 6 to 12 months from now?
It's interesting. I just did my kind of my projections.
Yeah.
I'd like to have 24 clients on the book
Yeah.
then, and I'm talking like on average kind of 200-person organizations. Technology is going to be a huge asset for me.
Hmm.
So just to be able to scale it. The beauty of mentorship, I've already been requested throughout the US and Europe and Australia to bring the MentorWell there.
Yeah.
So
Very
there,
cool.
and I've got a seller of mentors from around the world who just want to be involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? Been very gratifying, but you know what? We're still kind of we're hockey stick growth right now. And I don't want to, hey, I've owned a couple of businesses in the past,
Sure.
one of which I had for 20 years and did exceptionally well. And then the financial crisis hit in 2008, and I ended up shutting it down 2 years later, and we had 70 employees. I
Yeah.
don't want to go through that. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I also say I've never been more passionate about what I'm doing than I am doing right.
Sure.
And that's because I think in part because Maddie's on this journey with me. I see her as she's my co-pilot. And knowing that something transitioned over the last year, went from talking about Maddie would bring me sadness. Now it
Sure.
brings me elation. It brings me happiness. Just knowing that she's part of it. My boys are involved with it as mentors. And I'm, I'm genuinely happy for the first time in a long.
That's awesome, Chris. That's pretty powerful. Have you written a book? Because I think your story is compelling and would resonate with a lot of people. And I know you said you wrote a lot.
Yeah, I wrote a book 2 years ago out of the blue. I've been asked by a bunch of people, "Hey, Chris, why don't you write a book?" So I did. I wrote a book 2 years ago called "Wake Up, You Could Lose Your Teen to Suicide."
I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. I'm sorry I didn't share that. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been the worst promoter of my book, but it's available on Amazon, and it's not a doom and gloom. It talks about kind of the challenges, but it's more of a coaching and strategy book for
Yeah.
parents in how to identify and be more vigilant about their kids, and perhaps some strategies around that. I've
Mhm.
been getting a lot of pressure to write another book, but I'm already working 80-hour weeks. It's not to say I won't, but right now is not the right timing. This
Yeah.
is just to get some traction and to make sure we're up and operational and in front of as many people as possible is my
Yeah.
priority right now.
My question was meant as a compliment, but I completely understand what you're saying about you're fully focused on what you have on your table right now, in front of you right now. Chris, where can people go to learn more about MentorWell and yourself and your mission?
My website is thementorwell.com. It's got kind of our story. It's got our tools, our solutions, that teen signal check, which is a great awareness tool, as well as the ROI tool for companies to see how much they are losing in productivity and other cost centers because of how their employees' kids are impacting their bottom line. So the
Okay.
mentorwell.com is the website. You can find me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the easiest place.
On YouTube. We'll share your links in there as well for people to learn more about your business and the work that you do. Chris, thanks so much for joining me and spending some time on the HealthCast. We really appreciate it and powerful work you're doing. Keep it up and thank you again for joining us. Thanks, Chris.